With 2018 planting season around the corner, some producers are planning on using dicamba in their chemical regimen. Dicamba is a registered herbicide for the use in agriculture and other applications in order to control broadleaf weeds and woody plants. Due to problems from dicamba drift and volatilization in 2017, manufacturers willingly agreed to label changes imposing additional requirements for over-the-top use of dicamba products. We sat down with Nebraska Extension Weed Science and Application Technology Specialist Kruger at the 2018 Growing Our Future Conference to learn why it is important to read, study, and follow the dicamba product labels in order to properly apply this herbicide.
In 2017, there was a lot of reports of off-target movement of dicamba, and while dicamba was a very valuable tool for us in terms of weed management, obviously it came with a little bit of baggage in terms of the off-target movement piece, which caught the media and went viral over the summer and then early into the fall last year. So we're going into the 2018 season. We're going to see dicamba use again. We have a product label for using dicamba legally over top of dicamba-tolerant soybeans here in Nebraska, and the same thing with dicamba-tolerant soybeans and cotton in the southern states. So fully expect this year that we're going to see probably even more dicamba applied, and we're going to definitely see more dicamba-tolerant traits in those crops going into the 2018 season.
While going into the 2018 season, Greg reminds producers the importance of reading and studying dicamba's product instruction labels in order to properly apply this herbicide.
When we look at the use of dicamba in 2018, the labels that we're working with, Ingenia, Extendamax, and Fexapan, have very, very specific label requirements. All three of them have very descriptive definitions in terms of how we should apply these products, when we should apply them, and the best way to steward those products from an environmental standpoint. But we really need to make sure that we're understanding all the nuances in those labels. There's a lot of specifics, and if we miss even just one step in terms of some of those specifics in the label, we could open ourselves up to a situation where we see a lot of unintended effects, primarily from off-target movement.
According to Greg, all the steps listed on dicamba's product instruction labels are important to follow. However, there are some commonly missed steps.
Some of the steps that we commonly see missed, one is the buffers. If I'm spraying and the wind's blowing towards a sensitive area, that's kind of a no spray opportunity. I would even go beyond maybe the descriptions of the label and say, look, if I don't know what the neighbor planted in terms of soybean traits and the wind's blowing towards that soybean field, let's hold off. Let's really make sure we get this right. Another one that we commonly see missed is the inversion piece. I think it's really important to make sure that we're not making applications in temperature inversions. When we have those inversions present, those small particles are never reaching the target. So we've got to make sure that we're watching for that one. Wind speed and wind direction are critical components. But again, those other smaller pieces that generally lead to more off-target movement beyond wind speed and wind direction also are important. So boom height, nozzle selection, tank mix partners, what adjuvants we're adding to the tank all become very, very important. That's where reading and studying that label becomes important, because there's very specific directions for which nozzles I can and cannot use. In some cases, maximum pressures at which I can use those products. And so an applicator, I would encourage to check out the websites for the product they're applying within a few days of making that application even, because we're even seeing some changes occurring in season with the products that can and cannot be used in conjunction with these products.
In addition, the management for applying dicamba, both pre- and post-application, is also important for producers to understand.
First off, when I'm getting ready to apply these products, in addition to reading and studying that label, I'm going to make sure I've got the right nozzle tips. I'm going to make sure that I've got the right products going in the tank, that those products are approved for use with whichever dicamba product I choose to use. I'm going to make very certain that I'm using the legally approved formulations. There's lots of dicamba products out there. It's important to make sure that we choose one of those legally approved products. Post-application is also important. Tank contamination we saw last year was a major issue because, again, if we look at this dose response of dicamba on non-dicamba tolerant soybeans, it takes very little to cause symptomology. So in some cases we see down to 1/30,000th to 1/50,000th of the labeled rate is all it takes to cause a soybean to respond to dicamba if it doesn't have that tolerance trait. I've got to make sure I've got to get a sprayer pretty clean to get below that threshold. So one of the best things I try to recommend growers do beyond what the label says in terms of tank clean out and triple rinsing and going through the nozzles and hoses and screens is when you're finished applying dicamba, make an application with a non-dicamba product on a dicamba tolerant crop, whether that be dicamba tolerant soybeans or dicamba tolerant corn. Give yourself one field to let that product flush through the system before going into a soybean field that might be sensitive.